Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started today. I'm Ollin Sykes, and with me is Scott Sykes with Sykes and Company PA. We're a CPA and advisory firm that works exclusively with pharmacies all over the country. It's essentially all that we do. We're some 48 folks currently on the payroll, and we're glad to have you with us today. And we're also glad to have as our presenter and conversationalist Craig Robinson with RxCherryPick. And it's again our delight to be with you today, and we would like to have this as conversationalist as we can. We would encourage you to put in any questions that you have as we go through the process. I'm sure with Craig talking about cash flow and how what RxCherryPick does to enhance that, I'm sure you could clearly have a number of questions that we'll attempt to answer as we go through the process. So again, we appreciate the opportunity of you guys being with us today. And Craig, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Ollin. It's always good to see you, and good to see Scotty. I know we run into each other about 4 times a year, so with the way things are now, I kind of miss you guys. So
that's what COVID's done to us.
Exactly. RxCherryPick, usually, again, I'm not going to talk a tremendous amount about RxCherryPick. We're going to really focus on one of the core components for a pharmacy, which is cash flow. And cash flow is a big part of working capital. And it's a complicated subject. It's easy to say, but it's very complicated. And what I'm hearing from a large number of independent pharmacies is cash flow is very scarce these days. I don't know, Ollin, Scotty, you hearing the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Cash flow is the #1 issue we deal with each and every day without question.
Yep, exactly. So let's bounce to the next slide.
That's your contact information?
Yeah, we can go past that one.
Yep.
And I'm not going to read this verbatim to you, but what we talk about when we talk to our client base or potential clients is it's really come down to a philosophy. And there's 2 philosophies that exist out there. One is transparency-based philosophy, which we support. And then there's the rebate philosophy. An independent pharmacist really has to start choosing which philosophy they're going to be on. Now, the rebate philosophy has been around for 40, 45 years. And if it's working for you, that is great. But if you're short on cash flow, then you probably should start looking at the philosophy of transparency, not really chasing the rebate anymore. And part of this is the rebate itself. The very definition of a rebate means someone else is holding your cash flow. And that is not a part of our philosophy. Our philosophy is every dime that an independent pharmacy has, they should keep it within their bank account. And, cash is king. So the bigger your bank account, even though, for instance, cash flow can be, you may have outstanding bills because you're getting longer terms, but it still means you have the working capital within your bank. And it still means that gives you much more leverage rather than someone else holding your money and then deciding how much they're going to give back to you at some indeterminate point in the future. So
Craig, how does that change? You mentioned up here, it changes your workflow. Explain exactly with this transparency you guys have.
Yep.
And the fact that rebates are not a part of your process. explain that change in workflow, please.
Sure. So much of the workflow when you're dealing with a rebate-driven philosophy, it really has a lot of convenience. That it can be very convenient. You have one source, you place your order, you can have anybody do it, and that sort of flows in. It is now become your workflows changes to the ordering process. Even though it's relatively easy, you really need to have somebody looking and actively participating on what you're going to be ordering, because there's two factors, terms and pricing. And now you have to start making some accounting decisions based on that, what's in your best interest. So you're going to take control. So when I talk about workflow, I mean, rather than it just being a fire and forget convenience thing, which can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in working capital, you actually just actively participate. When I say actively participate, I'm not talking about you're going to sit on the online, for hours. We're just talking about you're going to review your order and make some decisions, whether you want to buy multiples of an item that you get good pricing in terms on, or it just becomes an active part of your business.
So you mean you don't want my computer to make that decision for the pharmacy?
Yes, and I don't want a tech making that decision for your business. The power of increased working capital allows you a lot of leverage and really sort of helps you move forward on that leverage. We all know what it's like when you go from, pharmacists are very good at deficit financing. And if you have to get bridge loans from your bank, that can be very expensive. If you already have the cash flow to essentially lend to yourself, then your bank can be much friendlier towards you, because we all know banks like to lend to people who have more money in their account. And so it relieves a lot of stress for these pharmacies, So we might bounce back to this page. Let's bounce to the next one, Ollin.
Okay.
This is the traditional model, this picture of how you place an order in a rebate-driven process. You push most of your order through to the primary. Your rebate, not transparently, but some sort of rebate is calculated. You also are buying from 2 or 3 different secondary wholesalers that have an item here and an item there that you're trying to get at a good price. It didn't come through on this, but on the rebate, if you look at the rebate and then you go down to pharmacy and there's a question mark, there was a big squiggly line, because you don't know, calculating a rebate is difficult. And it's based on a lot of factors that you may or may not be in control of.
You mean it's not transparent?
I mean, it is very not transparent. And I'll ask you this. Here's my trick question for you and Scotty. Is what's better for a pharmacy, a big rebate check or a small rebate check?
What's best for the pharmacy is that net gross margin net of rebates, period.
Okay.
So if there are no rebates, or if there are rebates, it's what that net gross margin percentage is, because that's the single most important number on the profit loss schedule for a pharmacy, period.
Yes.
In the conversation, that's the ticket right there.
Craig, I'm going to go with small rebate, because that means the pharmacy's keeping more on their side.
Well, you win the prize. because Ollin gave a complicated answer, which half the time I never understand what Ollin's telling me anyways. But it is a smaller rebate. And part of this comes from, you know, I'm sure you're familiar, and the people who are listening is the GCR, your generic ratio, okay? The natural level that we see out there for your generic ratio, the percentage on a dollar weighted basis, is roughly 12%. If your GCR is above 12%, that would mean that you are overpaying for your generics. And we're seeing GCRs of upwards of 25%. Okay. Well, Scotty and Ollin they're immediately doing the math in their head, and they're saying, well, that means you have to pay twice as much for your generics. 100% increase on generics to raise that GCR up. Actually, that number is higher because of the way they calculate it. But that is why Scotty's 100% right, is the smaller that rebate, that means the more efficient you've become in ordering what is closer to a fair market value of those generic drugs. And I can kind of tell Ollin's getting ready to say, yeah, but they could tell their patients to go to, let's have more, you know, they're selling more generic drugs. If you do it by bottle count, the real number is 20% brands, 80% generics. That's a pretty steady number. So the only way you start boosting that GCR is you have to overpay.
So when we are paying twice that normal GCR by paying more and waiting for that rebate to come out,
yeah,
obviously our cash is being consumed each and every due date of that wholesaler.
yep,
Our working capital is being depleted.
yep.
And while we wait patiently at the end of the quarter, end of the year for a rebate, if we meet certain guidelines, that's what you're talking about here. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. So again, the philosophy is you should know what you're paying for. Oftentimes when rebates are set, people automatically will go, well, first of all, let's just assume that, you know, you would get the largest rebate back. Well, I think if you pay twice as much for your drugs and then your rebate is 39% off the total, there's some money that you're not getting back. You're better at math than I am, Ollin, but
No, absolutely.
you know, so again, it gets back to you should make your decisions based on the price that you see and you know that's going to reside in your bank account. Then your cash flow will increase. I mean, the simple math is, let's say you're buying $100,000 worth of generics and you have a 24% GCR. Well, if all of a sudden you step away from rebates, you say, I'm no longer going to calculate a rebate into this process, then you go and you're able to maximize, this is where RxCherryPick comes in, maximize the pricing, and you get to 12%. Well, that would mean you're $50,000 to the good, and we haven't really even started doing the work yet. So that's a chunk of change.
In that compound.
So you're paying more. You're paying more for that rebate.
They have to, and the indicators, the GCR. You know, yeah. That's how you know you're paying more, because it's the only way to boost that percentage up is to pay an inflated price. You know, so you know, and this is the hard part. You know, a lot of pharmacists out there, you know, they were part of buying groups, and the rebate, you know, 5-10 years ago, you know, the rebate was a good thing. You know, now that everything's tightened up, it's tougher. You know, the people who are holding the rebate, they know what the value of that cash flow and working capital is, you know, but it's yours as an independent pharmacist.
We have a question from Eric, and he wants to know the definition of GCR.
It's your generic compliance ratio. So it's the percentage of your generics based on dollar volume on you know your what you're ordering from the primary. Did I
So
do
the typical wholesale bill is, or a contract is set up in such a way that your GCR rate has to be a certain percentage to get X rebates, correct?
It is based on the rebates. I think there's a piece of misinformation out there that when they say 90%, you have to have a GCR of 90%. That's in relationship to qualify for the top percentage of the rebate. And you're not in control of that. You know, pushing 100% of a generic in doesn't mean that you get 100% generic compliance, because there's two classifications of generics. There's the contract generics and there's non-contract. And you buy non-contract generics, you don't get any credit for that at all.
Why is that the case?
It's just how they set it up. You know, you only get compliance on contract generics. You know, and again, I can't answer for, you know, a whole $600 billion industry that's set this up, but the idea that if you go 90%, you have 10% leakage, that would be an error. And my advice to anyone who's doing the rebate system is do not buy away from your prime vendor agreement. Maximize it. So don't pick up those drugs that are well priced that you get a call from a secondary on, because you're punished you'll drop down a tier across all your generics. Now, you know, you're not getting as big a rebate. You have to be, this is really an on-off switch. And again, I'm not a fan of the rebate, but you really have to want to stick with one program or the other. Don't kind of do it, you know. I think, Ollin, a famous Southern saying is, if you're going to stand in the middle of the road, you're going to get hit from either direction.
Yeah.
So don't do that. Don't, even though you think, okay, I'm going to save 70% on this item, it could punish you to the point where you're going to lose. If you're on the rebate side of things, it could punish you to the point where you lose 20% of the rebate coming back to you. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Don't do that. We can jump to the next one. You can see how we do it.
Before we do, Carla says, don't most wholesalers pay on a brand to generic ratio?
That's part of it. I mean, again, there's many pieces to it, and you're asking me to answer questions for primary wholesalers, but yes, that ratio is the GCR, and that some primaries have a much greater weighted process, some less, but total volume, there's probably 6 factors that go into that.
So if the rebate process is not the optimum way to handle this, what is?
Go to the next slide.
You see it?
The optimum way, in our opinion, and this is our opinion, and this is our philosophy, is you simply step away from calculating a rebate into your pricing. So you just step back and go, I'm no longer going to do that. I'm going to let the market dictate what the price is. So in this slide, a pharmacy pushes its whole order into RxCherryPick, and we have, and again, we don't ask you to leave your primary wholesaler. The only thing that we say is don't factor in a rebate. And then we have relationships with a select few of other wholesalers that also feel that this is in their benefit. And that gets pushed in there. So, the primary can still win business. It just that the rebates no longer calculated in, and now it becomes a free market, and that really drives down the price. As an example, then, your GCR falls into that 12% range, where 12% of your dollars, not 24, 25. We've seen it as high as 32%. So then all of a sudden now, you know what you're getting.
So in this arrangement here, how can I be sure that the pricing that I'm getting from the various wholesalers is the optimum number for me as a pharmacist?
Well, here's an interesting thing: is that you can work at this. You can try and do this yourself and spend hours after work, cruising the internet, or you can work with us where we have some leverage. And the trick here is you never ever quote a price. You don't quote a price what your primary's getting. You don't quote a price what anybody else is giving. What you do is you say, we will open up the market, and these vendors, when they have the aggressive price, they win it. And when they don't, they see it go away. So this is a very free market model.
So it's a market-based model.
You could say that. It's an open market model without the restrictions of rebates.
And how can I be sure as a pharmacist that you have the necessary representation across the industry to maximize that open market process?
Well, if through RxCherryPick, the vendors that we work with, we collect when we have that pricing, we enforce that pricing. There can't be any monkey business about them not delivering the price that we say that those vendors are. I can't speak for a primary vendor because they don't care about us.
And Rudy is asking, does RxCherryPick interface with SureCost?
We haven't. Again, SureCost, I've heard of them, that kind of thing, and I'm vaguely familiar with them. They're just really sort of they're not doing the same thing RxCherryPick does. You don't need SureCost if you're using RxCherryPick. I mean, you can still have it, but the answer is probably not. We don't interface with SureCost. Part of that is we have to we're very secure about our information. And if you start going on other platforms, that security tends to go away.
And that security of the pricing, what is the rationale behind that?
That I can't really discuss, but it involves manufacturers.
Okay. So that suggests to me that manufacturers are very tight-lipped about what their pricing arrangements are, and they probably don't want that information shared in any more capacity than necessary. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say that they're more comfortable, and again, they're just more comfortable with something that they feel secure and it's not going to leak out.
Mm-hmm.
We can jump to the next one. I just put this slide in.
Before we jump, though, you got working capital and cash flow coming down here to the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit more about how that functions with the RxCherryPick model, again, vis-a-vis that rebate model. I know we discussed the rebate model earlier.
Yeah.
But explain your enhanced cash flow and working capital that I would be expecting.
What you can, I mean, again, expecting this is what you end up having is the money never leaves your account. Like Scotty said, it's someone else isn't holding your money. So you get better terms. Many pharmacies are probably, you know, the industry is really moving towards, and Ollin, you and Scotty see this probably all the time. There's a lot of pressure to be on weekly terms, if not weekly, daily terms.
Yes.
There's still people that are at twice monthly. The bulk of, you know, we get much better terms, you know, generally speaking, 45-day terms. Okay. So one, that has a profound effect on then your reimbursement, because now you're much closer to the cycle of selling the drug, paying for the drug, and also being reimbursed for the drug inside that cycle. So once again, your cash flow is flowing. If you're on shorter terms, that means you have to pay for the drug and then you're waiting, you know, 30, 45, 60 days for the reimbursement to come back to you. Now again, cash flow becomes an issue.
So if I'm buying $100,000 in generics a month, and that's a 24% GCR,
Yeah.
walk through the math with me real quick.
Yeah.
On an annual basis.
If you're buying 100,000 and you're currently using the rebate driven model, you're at $100,000, you decide I'm going to move away from that and I'm going to go to this more transparent model. Then what you have is your bill is due much further out. So what you're paying for the drugs generally will drop down to $50,000, $55,000 rather than you having to write a check, because your check is always net pricing. You know, I mean, I'm sorry, it's always list pricing on the rebate model. You'll pay list and then it comes back.
Yeah.
Here it's just, you know, the price is what the price is. So right off the bat, you go from $100,000 to $50,000 at the moment of purchasing, and then you may be getting your reimbursements coming in ahead of when the bill is due. So that helps you. We also, all of our clients, you know, are paying once their terms are done. And again, to a minor extent, some of the terms are 21 days, most of it's at 45 days, is daily ACH. So now your cash flow starts to smooth out too, because they're hitting your account every day on back 45 days on day one. You don't have to have this, you know, all of a sudden if I'm doing $400,000 in purchasing and now I got to come up with a $200,000 bill, you know, this is tough and I don't have the cash in the bank. You can see how it cascades.
So in your scenario, when I go 100% to your model, then the first 45 days, essentially, I'm accumulating cash.
Yeah.
You know, the 46th day, that very first day of purchases is being ACH from my account, correct?
Yes.
I have no rebate in this model of yours, correct?
We only, that I'd have to, there is a slight credit that occurs.
Okay. All right.
I can't go into details on it, but
Okay.
it's not a
So
rebate.
let's just say there's a slight credit that occurs periodically. But still, we have the fact, in addition to the 45 days, we're not making any payments. So
Right.
whatever your purchases are during that period of time, that's cash that's going in your bank account.
Yes.
You're also, on that 46 day and days thereafter, you're paying essentially half what you've been paying otherwise with the full pricing model.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Now, at the end of a month or end of a quarter, there's going to be some true up there technically, if you're comparing apples and apples, because there'd be rebates coming in from the regular wholesaler or buying group that you would have. So there'd be some true up that would occur. But ultimately, it's going to be the combination of the first 45 days of no purchases, and then from there on, um, obviously the savings that are occurring from the reduced price of the generics that we're paying for to begin with.
Yes. And here's
So my
here's
question is,
yeah, go ahead.
my question is the when you take the wholesaler, you look at the list price, and you factor in the rebate, you get a net price. So you're paying that higher price up front. You're getting that rebate on the back end several weeks later, whatever it may be. With CherryPick, you're actually getting that net price up front. And so, is there a difference? You know, if the net price is $10, you know, is it comparable between the net price between CherryPick and the wholesaler when you factor in?
See, now this is the hard part here. Okay, we cannot equate a rebate to savings. They are just two different categories. All right, and calculating a rebate is very imprecise. Partly because you're getting that rebate from 90 days ago, and it's not an itemized deal. So, and you're calculating, when you calculate the rebate, you in any given month that you're operating in, it is impossible to calculate what that number is because it's based on your ratio, which is constantly changing. So, again, that's why I talk about cash flow. You really have to not confuse cash flow with savings. The cash flow under the transparency model is exactly what Ollin had stated, was you basically are getting, for the most part, 45 days. Okay, so if you're purchasing $200,000 a month, I know this gives Ollin heartburn, but $200,000 a month, you're basically up $300,000 before your bills due. Okay, now don't go buy a car or something. You got to leave it in the bank, but that is cash flow. Savings, on the other hand, is again just different than a rebated coming back, because you don't know what the rebate is on that given month. It's
Because you don't know if you're going to hit, the tiers, et cetera, and
I can tell you this: you won't hit that top tier. It doesn't happen. So, and because there's no accountability for it, it's just a check. Now, here's the other thing that Ollin had mentioned: the truing up, which is the good thing. Okay, is, let's say you're on the transparency model, you've pushed the pricing down, so what you've bought through the primary is the lowest price in the market. And then if they give you a rebate, even though it's a small rebate, that is just pure gravy, because we don't factor that in. That's another mechanism that, to a very small extent, because if you look at your matrices, you're going to see that you don't qualify for any rebate, because you're just simply, they require much larger numbers, and you're not going to do that. Make sense?
mm-hmm.
Got another
This
question.
is the first. I got you and Ollin being quiet. This is
Got another question coming in from Tyler. Tyler says, wouldn't this model be detrimental to the NDAQ surveys in regards to cost of goods?
I don't know what the NDAQ survey is.
Tyler, if you can explain that a little further, then we can take it to another level.
Yeah, I don't know. If you sign up for us, your cost of goods are going to be your cost of goods. I don't know what some survey is going to say.
In your model here, generally, is the net gross margin net of the traditional model that we talked about initially? Is your gross margin typically higher?
Yes. And it,
By how much?
well, are we talking, I can't factor in DIR fees. Okay, but so I'm going to say,
Yeah, forget DR fees for the moment.
DIR fees, I'd say that we'd probably move, and you guys may have a better idea because of some of the clients we share, but you'll see that move anywhere from, depending on the kind of pounding you're taking, anywhere from 5 to 8% gross margin increase. We actually prefer, rather than looking at those numbers, what we suggest for our clients is to think a little more globally, not to price things on a line item basis, is to like look at your bank account. Has it increased? Do you have more money in your bank account at the end of the day? That answers the cash flow question.
All right, got another question coming in. Rudy says, I did away with primary wholesaler getting 30% rebate. Now going through secondary wholesalers and get a minimum 65% rebate. If I was to receive a rebate, pharmacies need to get away from the rebate model today to have a better chance to make it. Well, I think that's what exactly you're talking about, is it not, correct?
It is. Where you got to be a little bit careful on this is, and everybody overlooks this, is people like to say, oh, I'm 30% rebate, 60% rebate. In our model, no rebate. Those numbers mean nothing because you don't know your starting point. These catalogs, especially on the generic side, are you know, well, like what we talked about. If you have a 24% GCR, your catalog's starting at a much higher point. So it doesn't matter what a rebate you're going to get back. You have to start at the lowest possible point.
Tyler says the NDAQ is the National Average Drug Acquisition Cost. We have gotten a few requests to submit cost information from Medicaid, which is the basis of our reimbursement.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that because it's not really what we deal with.
Okay. All right. Certainly would entertain other questions that folks have out there, either about the traditional model or the potential new model that Craig is discussing here. Lines are wide open, and we'll wait just a second and see if any other questions are pushed out here, Craig.
Okay. This is fun.
While we're doing that, we can push up the next slide, perhaps.
All right. I just threw this in there to say this is a bad day for an independent pharmacist. And this happens more and more frequently when you don't have cash flow. It's a day when your payroll is due, your primary bill is due, and then all of a sudden a DIR hits. That's a lot of money. And we all know you go down and get a bridge loan and stuff, that comes right out of your gross profit. And the transparency model really sort of fixes that because you become your own bank.
Craig, tell us a little bit about should this be a good fit for somebody out there? Tell us how they what the learning curve is like, what it's like to switch from something they're so used to with the primary into something else.
Yeah, good question. The learning curve is actually pretty easy. There's no loading of a program or anything. Takes 20 minutes to train you. We have made it very easy on the user end to use. Now, the workflow is going to change, and you may have some techs not happy with you because what comes into play is the work you're going to have and checking items in, that kind of a thing, and it gets a little bit complicated. I don't want to get into that, but it has to deal with convenience of your pharmacy system just accepting orders receipts of orders back into the system. And the pharmacy systems, for the most part, aren't robust enough to handle NDC changes, all that kind of stuff. So it will be more work on the checking in, but on an average size pharmacy, we'll create, you know, and when I say an average size pharmacy, I mean our average size pharmacy for RxCherryPick, which does about 250 prescriptions a day. At the end of a year, you're probably going to have about $500,000 of working capital. So if having your techs have to change their workflow on checking in is more important than $500,000, we probably aren't going to take you on as a client. So.
And Craig, we got another question here. Another good one from Tyler. He said, how would your model compare with, say, current contract model with other buying groups? Do your vendors handle both generic and brands? And how about next day delivery?
We do handle generics and brands, so it's your whole order. It is all next day delivery. And the good news is, both of you know how crabby I can be, is if one of our wholesalers, you contact me about our preferred vendors, and then I will on your behalf contact our vendors to make sure that the issue is resolved, because we have much more leverage on them, and so it becomes very easy to resolve issues. If you have a mispick or a box doesn't show up, I can get it taken care of in minutes rather than calling up customer service, which doesn't really exist in the wholesale industry. I forget, what was the first part of that question?
How are you going to compare with other buying groups potentially?
We're not a buying group, so we don't compare. And here's another thing. What independent pharmacies have to stop referring to their prime vendor agreement as a contract. Okay, it's an agreement. I've signed a lot of contracts. Everybody signed a lot of contracts. It usually says it's a contract. And they have matrices involved. In that agreement, there's no guarantees. You know, as the pharmacists who don't have cash flow, who don't have savings, are facing financial stress, they know that that's taking place. So it's a prime vendor agreement, and that's what it is. It's an agreement on both sides of the party, basically saying you can do anything you want.
Got another question here. How would you advise a startup from scratch pharmacy in using the transparency model to purchase and open inventory?
That's hard. Startups, that's a difficult question, because there is, you know, if they have a source of revenue, and if you're low volume, you know, again, the effect is dollar weighted. So if you're only doing 10 prescriptions a day, you know, how much can we save you? You know, so you really got to get to that 100, 120 amount. And again, the primaries have a great service for startups where they'll front you the money to get you started. We don't do that. You know, so you got to get yourself started somehow. I mean,
well,
you probably have way more advice.
Craig, in fronting that money, let's say 6 months dated inventory for X amount, are they not pricing that into the whole model?
Oh, hell yeah.
Well, I thought that was the answer. So it's not a free ride that some think that it is, and
Yep.
ultimately, your net cost of goods sold, or how well you accomplish just what we're talking about here, we believe is the single most important thing you do in your pharmacy, period, in the conversation. If you don't have this under control, if you don't understand what the options are, and if you're not maximizing it, there's no way you will have the bottom line that you need to pre-tax or after tax. And notwithstanding the cash flow and profitability that you need at the pharmacy. question also from Tyler is, do you have front end also available, OTC items?
They are available. Again, it's a matter of how much is on your front end. We tend to go to the biggest area of impact, which is brand and generic drugs, front ends. I don't know what you guys recommend, but I'm guessing that you shouldn't be more than 5% of your total volume.
Tyler, sounds like you need to be having a conversation with Craig.
I think Tyler should have a conversation with Uncle Ollin. That's who I think should have a conversation with.
Got another question coming in. How does brand meds compare to rebate model? How does brand meds compare to rebate model?
So,
I think
well, it depends. Some have rebates built into their brand pricing based on all those other factors, which, isn't what we do. This is where the little bit of work comes in, and yours and Scotty's advice can come in. Is very important. Is you may end up paying a little bit more for a brand, but if you have to write the check for that brand or those brands weekly, or you can go out 45 days, what's the value of that money? And I would also say what pharmacists need to start doing is start calculating in when you're offered, well, we'll offer you 50 more basis points if you go to on your brands, if you go to daily terms. Well, do the math. 50 basis points on $100,000 is what? $500? There's no way that's worth it. As opposed to going out, unless they have to pay 75 basis points more than that really great deal on daily terms, but you're out 45 days. But now you're not, now you have all this cash flow. The answers here aren't like, okay, they're complicated issues, but at least Ollin, you and Scotty have given your group here a chance to make a choice.
Well, a lot of it's understanding what's out there versus what folks have grown up into and just made a part of their day-to-day process, not really realizing the importance of pure clarity and transparency, and that there are options out there in the marketplace if you're not signed up for multiple year contracts, which can be dangerous to your health.
Yep.
And because all of this centers around cash flow and profitability, which is critical in this particular industry at present, we just think it's a huge issue here that needs to be understood, which is why we wanted to expose this model here today. So that was the reason for us having this today. And got a couple more questions here, and then we're going to do the RX assessment, Scotty, which I'll let you do. From David, it says, are the brand purchases typically on 45-day terms as well?
For the most part, yes, unless you buy it from your primary.
Yeah.
It's a cash flow game.
No, it really is a cash flow game. It really is. And Scotty, speaking of cash flow and profitability, talk to them a little bit about the RX assessment that Sykes & Company can potentially provide for you.
Yeah, we do an RX assessment service. So if you are a pharmacy owner out there wondering where you stand, what maybe issues you have, if you maybe feel in your gut that something's not right in the back office there, we do have this service where we take your accounting file, a backup copy of that, as well as your tax returns for the pharmacy and or your personal as well, if you'd like us to look at those. We overview that internally, get you on a video call and walk through the balance sheet, the P&L, the tax returns, let you know what we see, good, bad, and different, give you some feedback, being this is all we do with pharmacies. We can look at these numbers and know right away the issues or concerns or the things you're doing very well with. and give you that roadmap of the things we think you need to focus on, and spend time on to turn your pharmacy around or work on some items. So, and cost of goods is obviously a major area of that, and as we're talking today, in cash flow. So this service, if you just go to our website, sykes-cpa.com, at the very top, you'll see Rx Assessment. You'll click on that and walk through that web page there. We'll get you everything you need to do there to sign up. We do charge $1,495 for that service, but we're pretty confident you're going to walk away with tremendous value from that. And should you want to move forward with Sykes and Company, we can discuss that as well at that time. So this is a great service for those who aren't really sure where to go, or if they've got questions on what they're doing or what's going on in the back office. This will get you those answers.
We will take, as Scotty mentioned, a deep dive into your accounting and tax issues. You will come away with actionable items here, whether you get us to handle those or whether you have your current CPA take care of that. Again, with us working essentially exclusively with pharmacies all over the country, hundreds of them for decades, we are able to see things that most firms don't have an opportunity to see. And we obviously follow very closely this industry niche. And again, those actionable items can be significant. I recall one situation last December with a gentleman we were doing this for, and we came up with a 7-figure adjustment to his benefit in tax year last year. Needless to say, he was pretty happy. But you will definitely come away with a different view of what your situation is. Again, whether you get us to, whether you engage us or not, you'll have a completely different view of that. As Scotty said, that's in the upper left-hand corner of our main webpage, which is Sykes-cpa.com. Please understand that the information we've talked about today is for general use only, not for specific tax, accounting, or financial purposes. You need to be talking to your own advisors. Here's how you can get up with Scotty and I if you have the need to. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're pushing out videos industry specific to pharmacies about every 10 days or so. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter as well. These phone numbers are direct to our desk. Feel free to give us a call if you have any questions, or email us. And you can always send questions to Ask Sykes at Sykes-CPA.com. Excuse me, that's Ask Sykes at Sykes-CPA.com. Ask Sykes at Sykes-CPA.com. I don't see any more questions, guys. We appreciate, Craig, you being with us today and walking through your particular model that's very transparent. And we look forward to everyone being on future Master of the Margin series. And if you register for this, you'll get a copy of the video. We send out to you probably the next day or so. We appreciate everybody joining us today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Craig. Good
Bye-bye.
job.
Thanks, Craig.